Why did ancient humans start counting time? Look at the time right now. Whatever it says, the hour, the minute, the day of the week, the date, the year, just look at it for a second. You probably glanced at it without thinking. You probably already knew roughly what it was before you looked. You live inside time the way you live inside air. It is so constant, so total, so completely woven into every moment of your existence that it has become invisible. The clock on your phone, the day of the week, the month, the year, the fact that it is this particular Tuesday in this particular season of this particular year, you know all of that. You carry all of that. It organizes everything you do. Here is the thing. None of it exists.
Not in any physical sense. Not in the universe. The universe does not know what Tuesday is. It does not know what a year is. It does not have months or hours or minutes or decades or centuries. It has matter and energy and change. The endless, indifferent unfolding of cause and effect across a cosmos that has never once paused to check what time it is. Time as you experience it, divided, named, numbered, organized into calendars and clocks and schedules and deadlines, is not something the universe gave you. It is something humans made. Someone built it. Someone at some specific moment in history looked at the world and decided to start counting it. And that decision, that single cognitive leap from feeling time pass to actively tracking it, is one of the most consequential things our species has ever done. This is the story of how it happened, and it starts much, much earlier than you think. Before we get to the evidence, we need to understand what we're actually talking about, because there is a crucial distinction that almost always gets glossed over in conversations about timekeeping: the distinction between experiencing time and counting it. Every animal experiences time. Your dog knows the difference between day and night. Migratory birds track seasonal changes with extraordinary precision. Bears know when to hibernate. Flowers open and close on daily cycles. The biological experience of time, the circadian rhythm, the seasonal awareness, the sense that things change, is ancient. It is written into the chemistry of almost every living thing on this planet. That is not what we are talking about.
What we're talking about is something different. Something that, as far as we know, only humans do. The ability to look at a repeating pattern in the world, the rising and setting of the sun, the waxing and waning of the moon, the cycle of seasons, and decide to count it. To say, this has happened before. It will happen again. I am going to track how many times it happens between now and then. And then I am going to use that count to organize my behavior in advance. Not reacting to the present, planning for the future. Using patterns from the past to build a model of what hasn't happened yet. That is not instinct. That is abstraction. That is the human brain doing something no other brain on this planet demonstrably does. And the cognitive architecture it requires, the ability to hold past, present, and future simultaneously, to see a pattern and project it forward, to mark the world in order to remember it, is the same cognitive architecture that underlies planning, storytelling, agriculture, cities, science, and every other thing we mean when we use the word civilization. Timekeeping wasn't a byproduct of civilization. It was a prerequisite. So when did it start? And what does the earliest evidence actually look like?
In 1950, a Belgian geologist named Jean de Heinzelin was excavating a site on the shores of Lake Edward, in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. He found a small bone, a baboon fibula to be precise, about 10 centimeters long with a series of notches carved into it, in what appeared to be deliberate groupings. The notches were not random. They were arranged in patterns, groups of numbers that several researchers have since interpreted as tracking lunar cycles. Specifically, a record of the moon's phases across approximately 6 months. This object, now known as the Ishango Bone, is dated to approximately 20,000 years ago. It is, depending on your interpretation, the oldest known mathematical object in human history.
Let that sit for a moment. 20,000 years ago, in Central Africa, a person sat down with a baboon bone and a stone tool and carved a record of the moon. Not because anyone told them to, not because there was a system already in place, but because they had noticed something. The moon changed. It changed in a pattern, and the pattern repeated. And that person decided, for reasons we can only guess at, that it was worth marking, worth keeping, worth remembering beyond the capacity of any single human memory. But here's the thing. The Ishango Bone almost certainly wasn't the beginning. It was just the beginning of what survived. Bone lasts. Most of what early humans made did not. The tools they used, the shelters they built, the marks they made on wood and bark and skin. Almost all of it is gone. What we have is the durable residue of a cognitive life that was already, by the time the Ishango Bone was carved, tens of thousands of years in development.
The evidence suggests as much. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, researchers have found pieces of ochre, the reddish pigment early humans used for body decoration and symbolic marking, engraved with deliberate geometric patterns. These fragments date to approximately 75,000 years ago. Some researchers interpret them as tally marks. Not everyone agrees. But the pattern of deliberate, repeated, organized marking, the cognitive habit of using physical marks to represent counted things, appears to stretch back much further than the Ishango Bone. The desire to count may be older than any object we have found to prove it. And if you want to push even further back, consider this. The capacity for abstract counting, the ability to recognize that 3 moons and 3 fingers and 3 kills are all instances of the same thing, the number 3, appears to be deeply embedded in human cognition. Children develop it early and spontaneously without being taught in every culture studied. The instinct to count, it seems, is genuinely human. What changed over time was not the instinct, but the ambition, the scale, the precision, the decision to apply that instinct not just to objects in front of you, but to the sky above you. Why the moon? Of all the things early humans could have chosen to count first, why did so many independent cultures around the world converge on the same celestial object?
Because the moon is the most reliable, most visible, most dramatically obvious repeating cycle available to the naked eye. It completes a full cycle from new moon to full moon to new moon in approximately 29.5 days, every time, without exception, without variation, without the need for any instrument more sophisticated than a pair of functioning eyes and a bone with a sharp edge to scratch it.
It is consistent in a way that almost nothing else in the early human environment was. Food sources were unpredictable. Weather was unpredictable. Animal migration patterns were roughly seasonal, but not precise. The moon was precise. The moon was the one thing in the world that showed up exactly on schedule, changed in a completely predictable way, and then did it again. For a species trying to organize behavior across time, trying to plan hunts, coordinate gatherings with groups living days of travel away, anticipate the timing of animal migrations and seasonal food sources, the ability to say, "Meet me at the next full moon," was not a poetic notion. It was a revolutionary coordination technology. It was the first shared clock of the human species.
And it worked because everyone could see it. Every culture on Earth independently looked up at the same object and started counting. The word for moon and the word for month are etymologically related in dozens of unconnected languages around the world. The connection between the lunar cycle and the human experience of measured time is so deep and so universal that it predates writing, predates agriculture, predates every formal system of knowledge transfer our species has ever developed. We counted the moon before we counted anything else, and we counted it everywhere. But the moon, it turns out, has a problem. 12 lunar cycles add up to approximately 354 days, which is 11 days short of a solar year, the actual time it takes Earth to complete one orbit around the Sun. Which means that a purely lunar calendar drifts. Every year, the months slip a little further out of alignment with the seasons. After a few years, the month you used to associate with harvest is now arriving in the middle of summer. After a few decades, the whole system has rotated almost completely out of sync with the agricultural reality it was supposed to track. For hunter-gatherers, this was manageable. For farmers, it was catastrophic.
When humans began transitioning to agriculture, roughly 10,000 years ago, the stakes of accurate timekeeping escalated dramatically. Planting and harvesting depend not on the moon, but on the sun, on the precise timing of seasons, on knowing when the last frost has passed and when the first frost is coming, on the solstices, the longest and shortest days of the year, which mark the turning points of the agricultural calendar with absolute precision. Miss the planting window, and you do not get a slightly smaller harvest. You get nothing. You starve. The difference between an accurate solar calendar and an inaccurate one was, quite literally, the difference between survival and death at a civilizational scale.
This is why humans started building monuments. Stonehenge, constructed in phases beginning approximately 5,000 years ago on the Salisbury Plain in what is now England, is precisely aligned with the summer solstice sunrise and the winter solstice sunset. The massive stones, some transported from quarries more than 200 miles away, are not arranged randomly. They are arranged so that a person standing at the center of the structure on the morning of the summer solstice sees the sun rise exactly over the heel stone, every time, without fail. Stonehenge is not a temple in the way we commonly imagine temples. It is an instrument, a massive, permanent, communally constructed instrument for tracking the sun's position across the year, built at enormous collective cost, because knowing when the seasons turned was worth that cost. And Stonehenge was not alone. It was not even unusual. The Egyptians aligned the Great Pyramid at Giza with extraordinary astronomical precision, its four sides oriented almost perfectly to the cardinal directions, its internal chambers designed to channel specific astronomical events. The Maya, on the other side of the world, with no contact whatsoever with the Old World civilizations, developed one of the most sophisticated and accurate calendrical systems in human history. A system so precise that it tracked the Venus cycle to within 2 hours of accuracy over 500 years. The Babylonians divided the day into 24 hours, the hour into 60 minutes, the minute into 60 seconds. Those divisions, made in Mesopotamia roughly 4,000 years ago, are the ones you are using right now.
Timekeeping was not invented once. It was not the achievement of a single civilization or a single region or a single moment of genius. It was invented everywhere, independently, repeatedly, by every culture that needed to survive at a scale larger than a single family group. The universality of that reinvention tells you something important. It tells you that counting time is not a cultural accident. It is a human necessity. Given enough time and enough pressure, every sufficiently organized group of humans will arrive at the same conclusion. The world has patterns. The patterns can be counted. The counts can be used. This is worth doing.
But here is the part of this story that almost never gets talked about. The part that is, in some ways, stranger than all the bones and monuments and calendars. What timekeeping actually did to the human mind. The invention of systematic timekeeping did not just organize human behavior. It changed the structure of human consciousness. Before counted time, you lived in a present that was continuous with a vague past and an unstructured future. After counted time, you lived in a present that was precisely located within a larger sequence, a sequence that extended backward into recorded history and forward into a plannable future. The concept of the future as a specific place you can prepare for, not just a vague sense that tomorrow will come, but a concrete, countable, plannable space, is a product of timekeeping. Before you can plant crops 3 months before harvest, you need to be able to think in months. Before you can tell someone to meet you at a specific time, you need a shared system for what time means. Before you can write a history, you need a framework for saying when things happened relative to each other. Dates, appointments, deadlines, anniversaries, historical records, scientific experiments with control groups, financial contracts, legal systems. All of it depends on a shared, counted, agreed upon framework of time. Remove that framework, and almost nothing we call civilization is possible. And then there is the strangest consequence of all, the one that changed not just what humans could do, but what it felt like to be human. Before systematic timekeeping, you were not a specific age. You were alive. You were young or old in a relative sense, older than your children, younger than your grandparents. But the precise count of your years was not a thing that existed. The concept of being 34 years old, of having a birthday, of tracking the passage of specific counted units from the moment of your birth to the present, these are not natural facts. They are artifacts of a counting system. Timekeeping gave human life a measurable shape it had never previously had. It gave existence a number. And with that number came things that had never existed before. The awareness of one's own age, the sense of time running out, the desire to leave something behind that would outlast the count of one's own years. The clock did not just measure human life. It invented, in some deep sense, the particular flavor of human urgency that has been driving us ever since. So, why did ancient humans start counting time? The honest answer is the same answer that explains almost everything strange and extraordinary about our species. Because they noticed something. Because they were the kind of creature that could not simply experience the world without also modeling it, tracking it, naming it, building systems to understand it better than they did yesterday. Because the moon kept changing in the same way, and some person, we will never know who, we will never know when exactly, we will never know what they were thinking in that specific moment, decided that the pattern was worth more than a feeling. It was worth a mark. They counted because counting was useful. Because counting made survival easier.
Because counting allowed coordination at scales that weren't possible without it. Because the harvest came back on schedule when you tracked the sun and planted at the right moment. Because you could meet your trading partners at the next full moon instead of hoping they'd show up around the same time you did. But they also counted, I think, because they were human. Because humans are the species that looks at the chaos of existence and cannot rest until they have found the pattern in it. Cannot rest until they have named it, until they have written it down, until they have built a monument to it large enough to see from miles away, made of stones dragged 200 miles, because the knowing was worth the wait.
The next time you check the time, and you will, probably within minutes of finishing this video, you are doing something that connects you without interruption to a person sitting in the dark in Central Africa 20,000 years ago, watching the moon move through its cycle and picking up a bone. They did not know what they were starting. They did not know that the mark they were about to make would eventually become the calendar on your phone, the clock on your wall, the year printed at the bottom of every document in the world. They just knew that the pattern was real, that it repeated, that it mattered. They counted, and we never stopped.